Hey everyone, Ronan here, and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're ready for part 6 of What If Brock Took the Gym Challenge. But before we get into that, got a couple of things we gotta do. First things first, let's shout out the patron. Forbidden Super, thank you very much for the support. And let's not forget that engagement is very important. So please, take a look at these analytics right here. Drop a like, drop a comment, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so that way we can get to a larger audience, as it's very important that we can get to more people. That way we can have a bigger family here at the Ronan Charizard channel. But with all that being said, let's get into What If Brock Took the Gym Challenge Part 6. I hope you enjoy. We begin today's episode with Joe and Giselle as they are heading down Route 5 heading to the city of Turffield. The two have been forced to stop for the night and make camp, but they seem to be making good time. Joe is in the process of making him and Sableye some food as Giselle complains that he's not moving fast enough. Her and Marowak are hungry as well, so make sure there's enough for the two, as she doesn't want to have to share any with the boy. However, Joe simply just keeps to himself as he can't believe the audacity of the entitlement of this girl. She's not at school with him anymore and she still thinks that she's in charge. The pampered life she lives is one that Joe could only dare to dream about, as he would never have the funds to experience anything like that. She really doesn't know how to take care of herself, Joe thinks to himself, and it's proven just by her actions while they've been out on the road. Giselle's been over-reliant on him the entire time, from making sure that he knows the way to Turffield to making sure that he is the one that's cooking all the food. She expects Joe to pull all the weight while she just sits there, trying to look pretty, because that's the only real talent she has outside of battling with her specially bred Pokemon that her father gave her. Giselle's mere presence is beginning to wear on the boy's nerves, but he does his best to ignore her as he continues to prepare the food, making sure that Sableye is well taken care of. Luckily for Joe, he doesn't really have to do much for Sableye, as its main diet is that of, well, rocks. And those are plentiful when they're out in the wild, which Joe watches as the Ghost Goblin walks into a random field and picks up a few of them before returning next to the campfire and chowing down for the night. This action is another thing that just causes Giselle to complain, as she can't really believe that Sableye is an actual Pokemon that someone would use, and it should be below Joe. But once again, Joe just ignores her as he finishes up the food and sits down to begin eating. The nerve, Giselle says as she watches Joe begin to take a bite into his food. How dare you sit down and eat before giving me any? To which the boy responds, what makes you think there is any food for you? Everything that I've made is for me and my Pokemon. It's not my responsibility to cater to your every need and whim. This gets under Giselle's skin. How dare Joe talk back to her, as she is a senior member of his class. He will do exactly what she says or face the consequences. But Joe just simply laughs as he continues to eat his food. What consequences? What class? We are not in school right now, Giselle. We are literally sitting underneath the stars out in the wilderness. You have no authority over me or anyone here. The only person that you're responsible for is yourself. And it's clear by the way you act and the way you demand on me and everyone else around you that you can't even do that. I told you when we left Pewter City, you were on your own. If you chose to follow me, then that was your deal. But I wasn't going to take responsibility for you. You have no power here, so get used to it and learn to stop being such a spoiled brat around everyone. This infuriates the girl as she and Marowak begin to stomp their feet around, demanding that Joe serve them, or else. The boy simply just looks at her and asks, or else what? This is where Marowak decides that it's going to take things into his own hands, as the Pokemon rushes Joe, trying to steal his food, showing just how entitled it is, just like its trainer. This triggers Joe's normally docile Goblin to interject, as it steps between both Marowak and its trainer. While Sableye normally seems that it's off in its own world, there's one thing that it won't stand for, and that's if somebody attacks Joe. It's very protective of the boy, and it demonstrates that here when it fires off a Shadow Claw on Marowak, forcing it to step back. How dare you attack my Pokemon, Giselle says. All it was trying to do was just get a meal for us. But Joe simply reiterates that Marowak attacked him, so Sableye was just protecting him. You need to learn your place. This isn't the Pokemon Institute, and no matter what you try, no matter who you demand from, you're not going to get your way. This is the real world, and things don't work like that, Giselle. The girl is awestruck by the tone that Joe is taking with her. Ever since they left the Institute, it's like he forgot his place in the pecking order. Well, she aims to show him exactly where he belongs, as she tells the boy and his ghost type to get ready. They're gonna have a Pokemon battle so that way she can remind him exactly of his place. However, Joe just tells her that she's crazy. She needs to go off and find her own campsite. He's getting really sick and tired of dealing with her in any capacity. However, before he can complete that statement, Marowak is on the attack as Giselle has ordered a bone rush. Sableye steps in, quickly taking the attack, completely unguarded to protect its trainer. While there is a little bit of pain on the ghost type's part, it is able to absorb the blow, preventing any type of damage to Joe. It's here that the boy puts his food down and stands up, thanking Sableye for saving him, and then he orders it to use a disable, so that way Marowak won't be able to use its ace move against them anymore. Giselle cries that that's not fair. This is a Pokemon battle. Why would he do something like that? However, Joe says nothing, ordering Sableye to use an Icy Wind. The goblin does so, striking the ground type for super effective damage, to which Giselle can't believe that Joe would actually attack Marowak like that. It was completely uncalled for. She then begins to stomp her feet as she whines, telling Joe that this isn't fair, and almost in suit, Marowak does the same thing, executing an attack called Stomping Tantrum that is able to strike Sableye, sending it back towards Joe's direction. Joe responds that he thought Giselle was supposed to be the older one, but here she is, acting like a baby, and he's not going to entertain it any longer as he orders Sableye to use a Shadow Claw. Giselle then orders another Stomping Tantrum from Marowak, and just as the two get ready to clash, they are interrupted by the sounds of chewing, to which Giselle and Joe both turn to see two Pokemon that have helped themselves to the food that Joe had prepared. One of them is a Pokemon known as Choodle, a water rock type, and the other one is a bird-like Pokemon that Giselle has seen before in the Cancer region. However, it's slightly different, known as Farfetch'd. The two put their immediate differences aside as they realize that if they don't stop those two, then the food is going to be completely gone. So for the time being, Marowak and Sableye engage with Choodle and Farfetch'd, trying to prevent them from eating all the food. But unfortunately, it's too late, as the meal that Joe had prepared was only enough for just him, which means those two were able to clean the dish pretty quickly. This enrages Giselle as she is pretty hungry, and she's not going to let this go unpunished. So she decides that the one who's going to be the bearer of her wrath is this Farfetch'd, as she orders Marowak in with another Stomping Tantrum, striking the fighting type. But she doesn't let up, then ordering a double kick, to which the ground type is able to execute with little resistance from its opponent. This pattern continues until Farfetch'd is a battered sack of lumps at the feet of Marowak, with Giselle steaming from the ears, looking for who's next. However, she was so engaged with the battle with Farfetch'd that was really just a one-sided thrashing that she didn't realize what happened with Joe. And it's really quite simple. He decided that he didn't want to be part of Giselle's little freak show anymore. So he packed up his belongings and decided to head off so that way he can get away from her while she was distracted with dealing with Farfetch'd. Giselle can see that Joe has made it a good way down the road with Sableye and that Choodle intel, to which she demands to know where Joe is going. This isn't done. They haven't finished their battle, but Joe simply ignores her and continues walking. He would rather travel throughout the night than deal with her anymore. Now realizing that she's all alone, Giselle begins to panic slightly. As Farfetch'd still lays there with spirals in its eyes, she's unsure of what to really do. She can't spend the night out here all by herself. What would she do to protect herself? She needs somebody to be security for her. But she does show a little bit of remorse when she realizes that Farfetch'd isn't going to be able to protect itself either. So she decides that she's going to follow Joe and get it to a Pokemon Center. But the only way she can really move it is to use a Pokeball. So she throws it at Farfetch'd and then grabs her bag, telling Marowak they have to go before Joe gets out of sight and they lose track of him forever. The last thing we see as she runs after Joe into the night is her ordering him to wait up for her. But the boy simply ignores her, trying to put as much distance between the two as much as possible. With Joe's annoyance with Giselle allowing him to work through the night and basically give him the motivation to get to Turffield, they arrive in the town midday next day, to which by this point Giselle is beaten, battered, and looking very weary. She can't believe that Joe would force her to run the entire way to Turffield at nighttime. The dangers they had to face. She could have been hurt. However, the only reason there was dangers is because she wouldn't stop being loud, complaining about everything and drawing attention to herself, while Joe was quiet, eventually making friends with Choodle and presented it with the option of a Pokeball, which allowed him to catch the water type. As the two enter the town, Giselle pleads with Joe for them to go to the Pokemon Center so that way they can get a room and get some rest and some food. However, the boy simply ignores her as he has one thing on his mind: the Turffield gym, as Brock has to be there. So Joe presses on as he sees the gym off in the distance. Giselle, now a bit delirious with the things that have happened overnight and the severe lack of nutrition that she has received, thinks that Joe has finally come to his senses and is going to lead her to the Pokemon Center. So she gives chase as best she can, trying to keep up with the boy, as he is now walking in with a brisk power walk, trying to put distance between her and him while getting to the gym so that way he can catch up with Brock. Unfortunately for the girl, she quickly finds out that Joe has no interest in her needs or wants, and the only thing he can think about is finding Brock. As they arrive to the Turffield gym, and Joe heads inside, leaving her outside sitting on a bench, looking rather disheveled. As Joe enters the giant building, he is met with a sight that he wasn't expecting. While there is a gym battle going on, it's not with Brock and the gym leader, it's with another boy, as Joe sees what looks like to be a Charmander falling in battle to a massive building-sized Pokemon. As the battle is called, the boy lets out a sigh, as he was sure he would be able to beat Milo this time, to which the gym leader tells Leon that he's getting better, but he's going to have to train a little bit more, and he really needs to master his Dynamax usage. If he does that, then he might have a chance to actually beat the gym leader. This is where the two notice that Joe is standing on the edge of the field, to which Milo greets the boy, asking if he's here for the gym battle, but Joe is a bit catatonic at the moment, as he can't quite get over the shock of the Pokemon he just saw. Oh, right, you probably never seen Dynamax before. Well, that's what it is. That was my Flapple, Milo responds. However, this finally gets a response from Joe as he says, no, I know what Dynamax is. I just never seen it before in person. I didn't think that they would be that big. Milo chuckles. Well, I can see you're well versed in the subject. So, are you here for a gym battle? But Joe simply declines, saying he's not here for that. He actually came here looking for somebody, a friend of his, someone by the name of Brock. This gets the attention of both Leon and Milo, to which Milo says that Brock was here, but he left a couple of days ago. He doesn't really know where the boy went after he lost to Milo. This causes Joe to get sad. He was really wanting to see his friend again and get him to come back to the Pokemon Institute, and he begins to turn to exit the gym, thanking Milo for the information as he considers what options he has left. Walking away, Joe heads back outside with his head hanging low, only for Giselle to berate him for not doing what he was told, but Joe simply ignores her as he sits down trying to figure out what his next plan of action is going to be. Luckily, he won't have to wait long to find something out, as the boy that was battling Milo, Leon, comes out to join the two. Introducing himself, Leon asks if they're friends with that jerk Brock, to which Joe is a bit surprised about, but he confirms that he is. They came here from Kanto to look for him. While Leon isn't the biggest fan of Brock because of their previous encounter, he does say that he knows where the boy might still be, as there was a certain spot he was training in and Leon had encountered him. This immediately perks Joe up as he asks where the boy is, but Leon states, why don't we head to the Pokemon Center, because I need to get my Pokemon checked out before I start training again, and you two look like you could use a good night's rest and a meal, to which Giselle immediately sighs relief. Finally, someone who has a clear sense of direction on their head and knows when there are people in need and can take care of them, to which Leon just looks at her with a puzzled look on his face, and Joe simply tells him to ignore her. He doesn't even know why she's still following him. Giselle and Joe begin to argue as Leon looks on, a bit unsure about this odd duo, as we fade to the night of that conversation, where Joe and Leon are sitting in the injury area of the Pokemon Center. By now, the boy has had more exposure to Giselle and her attitude towards everyone, and he has to comment to Joe that he does not like the way she acts. She's so superior to everyone, and the perception that she has of reality is a little warped, he says, to which Joe confirms. It's here that Leon asks why Joe's even traveling with him, but Joe states that the reason why she's following Joe around is because she feels like Brock owes her something because of what happened back in the academy in the Kanto region. However, he's only here to find Brock so that way he can get him to come back to the academy because of something that Giselle did that made Brock think that he was expelled. Wow, that's low, Leon says. I can't believe somebody would do that. But Joe says that's just Giselle's MO. That's all she does. She thinks she's better than everyone. And when Brock started to pose a threat to her top position in the class, she decided to retaliate for it. Leon begins to say something, but the two are rudely interrupted by Giselle, who demands to know where they have been this whole time. She finally finished showering after being on the road for so long, and she's demanding that they get her something to eat, to which Joe and Leon both stare at her with a blank look. That triggers Giselle to retaliate with a very spiteful voice, demanding that the two do as she says. After all, they're below her as far as classmates are concerned. It's at this point that Joe can no longer take it. She doesn't get it through her thick head that they're not in the school anymore, and he begins to yell at her, belittling Giselle just like she does to everyone else around her. This causes the girl to get quiet. "What is wrong with you?" he asks. "You talk to everyone like you're better than them, but in reality, you're the one here out of desperation." "You are pathetic," Joe says. "And the fact that you think Brock is going to come back to save your sorry butt and prevent you from getting expelled is laughable at best. Face it, Giselle, you and your pathetic friends, your days are numbered. And when Brock gets back to the academy, well, let's just say you're going to be a distant memory." This causes Joe to walk off in rage, with Leon following him, leaving Giselle standing there speechless. As the two boys begin to make distance from the girl, Leon states that was a little harsh, but he understands where Joe's coming from. The boy says Leon has no idea what he's dealt with since Giselle followed him out here to Galler, and he's just tired of it. He's hoping tomorrow he gets an early enough start to where Giselle won't be able to keep up with him. And speaking of that, can you tell me where Brock was the last time you saw him? Joe asks, to which Leon happily states that's no problem at all. He can see that he's in a little bit of duress and he wants to find his friend, even though Leon still thinks Brock is a big jerk. But he has no problem with Joe, so he tells him that the last time he saw Brock was at a place called the Galler Mines, south of Turffield. It's about a day's walk if they hurry. Joe thanks the boy and asks Leon what he's going to do from this point on, to which Leon says he's heading to Route 5. He's got some training to do to prepare for his rematch against Milo. Rematch, huh? How many of those have you had so far? Joe questions, to which Leon sheepishly states that he's now going to be on his fourth one. That's why he's got to make sure him and Charmander are in tip-top shape. Well, Joe wishes them luck, as we fade into the night and to the next morning. And just as Joe promised, he got up super early, trying to avoid Giselle at all costs. And after saying goodbye to Leon, he was quickly out the door. But unfortunately, the girl has a level of tenacity that Joe hasn't really ever seen from her before, and this allows her to catch up to him rather quick, even though he got outside of Turffield before even catching any sight of her. But the boy is still not over what happened the previous night, and he tells Giselle to stop following him. He doesn't want to have anything to do with her. However, Giselle just ignores the boy, as Leon had told her the location of Brock himself, so she knows exactly where she's going, and no longer requires the assistance of Joe. So even though the two are no longer traveling together, they both make their way down the same path heading towards the Galler Mine. And just like Leon said, with a sense of urgency, they were able to make it there in about a day. But as they enter the mine, what they thought would be a normally quiet place isn't exactly quiet, as they can hear a loud banging and clanging coming from deep within the mine, and then followed by a yell to which sounds like Brock. Joe, thinking that his friend is in trouble, immediately rushes down the corridor trying to find him, to which Giselle follows, because if anything happens to Brock, then she won't be able to stay in the school. The two frantically search, but it doesn't take long for them to find their friend. However, he's not in any distress at all. He's actually in the middle of a Pokemon battle. It's him and Karkle, and he's facing off against a giant Pokemon that appears to be a steel type, with an individual that shares the same dark tone skin that he has, who appears to be jolly and enjoys life to no end. This is where they hear Brock speak for the first time in weeks, as the boy tells this man, Peony, that he's not going to win the battle this time, as he orders Karkle to use another flame charge. However, Peony tells the boy that even though he may have the advantage and may know his battle strategy by now, that doesn't mean that that's going to determine the battle, as he orders his Pokemon known as Caparajah to use a heavy slam. Unfortunately for Brock's starter, it's going to prove just how outmatched it is here, as it doesn't possess the weight advantage, as Caparajah brings all of its weight down on the rock type, squishing it in the process and bringing the battle to an end. As the two recall their Pokemon, Peony states that Brock is getting better. He should be ready to challenge Milo soon enough, but there's just something that the boy is missing, the man says. Well, at this rate, and the way that Karkle and I have been growing, I'm sure we're going to find it soon enough, Peony. I want to thank you for hanging out with me and battling. You're a really strong trainer, so it's been a big help. And just as the man says something, they are interrupted by Joe as he cries Brock's name. Our hero turns to see Joe running towards him with what appears to be tears in his eyes, as he closes the gap quickly to hug his best friend. Joe, what are you doing here? Brock says, to which the boy begins to mumble, trying to get out all of the things that he's kept pent up over the last couple of weeks. This is where Brock tells him to slow down a bit. He can't really understand what he's saying, so Joe takes the time to wipe his eyes and clear his throat before telling Brock that he has to come back to the school. He's not expelled. He's going to be allowed back in. I was able to get your battle validated at the last minute, which means everything was legal. Brock looks at Joe, then gets ready to say something, that is, until he sees somebody very familiar step out of the shadows of the mine. Giselle. Brock wants to ask her what she's doing here, but this is where the girl pleads for Brock's mercy. He has to come back to the school immediately and tell everybody that it was just a misunderstanding. After all, they're friends, aren't they? Because if he doesn't tell them that it was just a huge misunderstanding between everyone, then she's gonna get expelled too. And what kind of friend would he be if he let her get expelled? I mean, after all, everything she did for him. He couldn't let her take the fall for something that nobody should have gotten in trouble for in the first place, could he? This is where Joe tells Brock not to listen to Giselle. The only reason she came out to Galler was just because she was trying to save her own skin. The headmaster told her that if you didn't return, then she would be expelled. So the way she sees it, if she gets you to come back to straighten everything out, then she'll be fine. Giselle doesn't like the tone of Joe, and it's here that the two begin to argue as they begin to belittle each other in front of Brock. And it gets to the point to where both Brock and Peony just look on, wondering what these two are arguing about. But the boy doesn't have time for this, and he yells for both of them to be quiet. He's not going back to the academy, which immediately shuts both of them up and sinks both of their hearts for different reasons. Joe because his best friend is no longer going to be there with him, and Giselle because she's about to lose everything that's important to her. The girl immediately begins to plead with Brock, telling him not to be so selfish. Do something for someone else and stop thinking of yourself. However, Brock simply ignores this plea as he looks at Joe asking what's wrong. The boy has trouble articulating what he's trying to say, merely being able to get out the words explaining that his best friend isn't going to be with him anymore, and he was hoping that wouldn't be the case. Joe did everything he could to get Brock to come back to the school, so that way they can continue to battle and train together and get stronger and eventually become the best ones in the school. Brock smiles, putting his hand on Joe's head, telling the boy that it's not his fault that he won't be back. When he went to the academy for the first time, it was because it was the suggestion of his father. He was angry at his dad because of the things that were going on in their personal life. But after spending so much time at the school and then getting a chance to come home and then coming out here to Galler, Brock realized that the school isn't where he wants to be or where he needs to be. He needs to be in the actual league challenge. And this is where Joe reveals that his dad told him the entire story. That's how they found out he was out here in Galler. I see, Brock says. Well, then you must know that's the reason why I can't go back. I have to do what my father couldn't. I intend to challenge the Galler League here and become their champion. He couldn't even get past the first gym, and neither could I, for that matter. But with all the training that me and Karkle have been through, I intend to re-challenge Milo and win my first badge, and to go on and face the others and then challenge the champion of the region. I see, Joe says. Well, if that's the case, then you're going to need somebody here to help you, and I'm not going to let you travel alone, so I'm going to be going with you as well. But Joe, you got to be back at the academy. Oh, don't worry about that. I told the headmaster that I may take a little bit longer to get you to come back because you had gone on vacation into another region, so I had to go find you. So they're not expecting me to be back for a while, and I'm sure if I call them and keep them updated periodically, they'll allow me to pause my tenureship there. Giselle's watching all this, completely flabbergasted why Brock would completely ignore her and not go back to straighten things out. But when she wants to say something, she's interrupted by the burly man known as Peony. He tells Brock that if he plans to continue his challenge of the Galler League, then he's going to need to meet a friend of his to help him obtain a new level of power. And this is where we are going to leave things for now. So tell me, how did you feel about this part? Did you enjoy the banter back and forth between Giselle and Joe? How did you feel about their first captures in the Galler region? And what about Brock's resolve to stay in the region and do what his father couldn't do? And of course, what about the introduction of Peony and the role that he's going to play here in Galler? And who is this person that the man wants the boy to meet so that way he can gain a new level of power? Let me know in the comments down below. And that's all we had for today's video. I really appreciate you guys stopping by to watch all the way to the end, and I just wanted to say thank you for that. If you guys really enjoy my content, consider following me on some of my other platforms like Discord, where you can get to know other people who are interested in what ifs, or on Twitter, where I post sometimes behind the scenes updates. Or if you want to help the channel grow a little bit extra, why don't you consider donating like the people right here have, as whatever you could offer could help us get to a larger audience by helping us get new videos done, or some of the projects that we were custom art is getting kind of expensive. So we want to make sure that we have the funds to do that. But with all that being said, I really hope you guys enjoyed everything, and I will see you in the next video.